Homelessness is a problem that affects everybody. It's a very visible problem at the moment. Lots of people can see it and lots of people are concerned. It's also a problem that has a number of complex causes. And actually the best way that we can address it is to collaborate and all work together. So a conference that promotes that is ideal.
It's the opportunity for a number of organisations to get together, because it's something I think we all see so much around Liverpool that we all want to get involved with. You can't help but feel sorry or want to help such people who are homeless on the streets of Liverpool. I think it's something we can just work better on together rather than singly.
Thank you. Friends and colleagues, good morning. Welcome to Liverpool Parish Church. I'm Professor Michael Parkinson, University of Liverpool, and I'm privileged to be your chair today for this conference on homelessness and rough sleeping, who cares? A conference initiated by the Community Foundation of Merseyside, hosted by the Parish Church, and with the support of the University of Liverpool and my Vice-Chancellor. This is a really important day. It's a really important issue. We have a really powerful group of speakers, and we have a really large, influential audience. I think that is all testament to the level of concern about and the seriousness of the issues we're here to talk about today. It's a very full morning with many speakers, and I was told not to talk for a very long time, and I kicked off. For me, there's 4 questions, very technical: what, why, who, and how. The what is to examine the experience of and national and local responses to homelessness and rough sleeping. We could dress it up, we could call it a challenge, we could call it a crisis, we could call it a disgrace that in this 21st century, people in our country are reduced to sleeping on our streets with the risk of physical harm, illness, and death. We've got 3 aims in this morning. First, understanding. Second, engagement. And third, I think most important, action. They're all important, but I think action is really important. We want to ask the question, how can our friends and colleagues in the private sector, mainly in this room, actually help to do something constructive and positive in the future? We're doing a great deal already, as the Mayor will tell us, but there's more to be done. The second theme is understanding, trying to understand the scale and the nature of the problem, the wider national as well as the local drivers, which cause the things that we see on our streets, but perhaps don't see in our hostels, in adequate private housing, in our cars, or people surfing in front rooms. Estimates vary. I think we've probably got 160,000 people homelessness in this country, up from 120,000 in the last 5 years, projected to double in the next 20 years. The causes are complex, as Jon Sparkes will tell us, but essentially this is a structural, not an individual problem. It is not their fault, it is our responsibility. The causes: not enough social housing, the rules governing tenure and rental rises, the changing benefit system, universal credit, the impact of austerity on local government services and capacity, unemployment and work poverty, and the rules and treatments of migrants. These are driving it, and we'll probably talk about that at more length today. The why, I think that's easy. This is an individual and institutional, political, moral challenge. As we all walk around the city, and the city centre in particular, at work or at leisure, we see the evidence of a fantastic renaissance in Liverpool. Fantastic, in the last 10, 15 years. But increasingly we see homeless people, and we see that related phenomenon which is different of street begging. We all feel individually stressed, guilty, pressured as we pass by or as we give. And as we've done either, we wondered if either was the right thing or the wrong thing. It's a challenge for our city, for our reputation, our business, and our people. We all feel we need to do something, but we're not quite sure. And I think the final reason, the why, the private sector has not, I think, been sufficiently engaged in this debate, and we wanted to be more at the table in future, and thank you all for coming. The WHO, Community Foundation Merseyside initiated it. Liverpool Parish Church immediately responded. We at the university were very happy to support. So how are we going to do it? In terms of understanding, a very full day. I'm delighted to say we've got Jon Sparkes, who's CEO of Crisis, the homelessness charity, working for 50 years, talking in the national context and also his reflections on Liverpool, and I think reflections on what the private sector might do. We have Karl Smith, a survivor of homelessness, to give his account of what it means. We have speakers, the Mayor of Liverpool and his officers, Joe Anderson, Metro Mayor Steve Rotherham and his officers are present. Liverpool is ahead of the game nationally, but we need to do more. We have senior people, a panel, Bronwen Rapley, CEO Onward, Stephen Connolly, Estate Director, Liverpool One, Denise Banks from Gaskells Waste, our Chief Constable Merseyside, Andy Cooke, and the CEO of Liverpool Football Club, Peter Moore, to reflect, I think, on three things: their individual institutional experience of this, their thoughts on how it might be tackled, and in particular, what might be done next. The audience will be here to suggest ideas and proposals, and at the end, we'll have reflections from three colleagues, provocations, Liam Thorp, who's political editor of the Liverpool Echo, Bill Addy, who's CEO of the BID, and Rae Brooke, CEO of Community Foundation, will come back to talk about the possible creation of a task force for a business charter. We'll end with our contribution to international project, which the Rector, Crispin, Pailing, will tell you about. We won't get all the answers today, but I do hope we can sketch out a future agenda for action that we can agree we will take forward in the coming months and years. That's what we're trying to do today. Enough from me. Can I please ask you to welcome Crispin Pailing, the Rector of the Parish Church, make his contribution. Thank you, Crispin.
Thank you. I won't speak for long because we have a long morning ahead of us, but I'd like to welcome you here to Liverpool Parish Church. We've been here since the 13th century, and the reasons why we as a church would want to engage on this topic of homelessness seem fairly evident in terms of faith and our concern for humanity. And I'll say a little bit more about that in just a moment when I tell you about the sculpture. The particular reason why Liverpool Parish Church should be involved in this is historic as well. We haven't just been offering worship since the 13th century. We haven't just been here to meet people's needs when they come to us, but historically we've been engaged in action throughout that time as well. The unusually close, almost unique bond between the parish church and the city, which isn't replicated anywhere else in the country, has been based on action. Back in the 17th and 18th century, when we ran from this church all the health and social care in the city, the meetings took place in a predecessor of this building, but where you're sitting now. We were talking about homelessness then. We were having to deal with the people who were coming to this city thinking that they could find help, employment, support, and those who were hungry. We were arguing with the other authorities about who was going to pay for it as well, which mainly seems to be the parish who paid, but never mind. We also paid for paving the streets, so think on that as you do your budgeting. So we've been involved in action for all this time, but at the heart of it, obviously, we are a faith community, and we engage with those around us on that basis. And at the end of our morning, I'd like to invite you all to come out into the gardens where we'll unveil a new sculpture. I say new sculpture. If you put Homeless Jesus into Google Images, then you'll see that they are all around the world, even in Manchester. And now we've got our own. And the Homeless Jesus, there's a picture of it in your programme for the day, so I don't need to describe it. It speaks for itself. And there's a space on the bronze bench next to it, and that's a challenge to all of us and a challenge as we think about it. Just as you think about that image that's in front of you in your programme, just think, would I sit next to a homeless person lying on a bench? If it were Jesus on the bench, would I sit next to Jesus on a bench? I'm not sure what my answer would be to either of those questions. In fact, I probably do know what the answer would be, but there's a space on that bench and you can sit in it or you can think about it. But when we go outside, we'll be joined by residents and clients of YMCA Liverpool, and they're represented in the audience here today. And it's people, survivors of homelessness or those who are still living in hostel accommodation, who will unveil the sculpture for us, which will then be blessed by the Bishop of Liverpool. So I do hope that you can stay for that as well, and it will then be a daily challenge to those who walk past it as they engage with the issues around us, issues which we engage with in real form every time we walk outside the doors of this building and every time we walk outside the doors of your buildings, because the homeless are there. The people affected by homelessness are there all around us all the time. So welcome, thank you for coming, and thank you to Michael for chairing. We'll say more thank yous at the end. I'd like to introduce Rae Brooke as the Chief Executive of the Community Foundation Merseyside.
Thank you, Crispin. Homelessness and rough sleeping, who cares? I want to thank each and every one of you today for taking the time out to care. I'd like to provide just a little further background as to why we are here today. The title and focus of this conference came as a result of a coffee the Rector of Liverpool and I had some 6 months ago, where we looked at what we could do to mark the event of the 20th anniversary of the Community Foundation for Merseyside. In those 20 years, the Community Foundation has distributed over £40 million to grassroots community groups and charities across the Liverpool City region, tackling many issues such as domestic violence and abuse, mental health, social isolation, all of these issues which are inextricably linked to homelessness and rough sleeping. However, I wanted this event not to be about the achievements of the past, but what we could continue to do and the difference we could make for the future. The desire for us to focus our attention on homelessness and rough sleeping was due to the increasing visibility of the issue that we were seeing in the city, and also it coincided with the Rector's plans for the installation of the sculpture of the Homeless Jesus. So a partnership and plan was formed, and we were quickly joined by Professor Michael Parkinson, who was helping us with our efforts. On reflection, I'm not convinced that we got the title of this event correct, because it's more than homelessness and rough sleeping. It's about homelessness, rough sleeping, professional beggars, sofa surfers, homeless that are not visible on the streets, but individuals who appear displaced, lost, and not positively included in our community. This issue can affect us personally, professionally, and is a reflection of the community we live in. The vast majority of my career was spent in the private sector, but I spent 7 years attracting global inward investment. First impressions of the city region were paramount in securing multi-million-pound investments. Thankfully, homeless and rough sleeping wasn't prevalent during that time. All of us surely want a Liverpool City region we are proud to live in, work in, invest in, a region that boosts our visitor economy, attracts students far and wide, while supporting the most vulnerable. The Community Foundation for Merseyside are not experts in homelessness and rough sleeping. There are many frontline service deliverers here today who are. But what we can do is promote a shared understanding and hopefully greater engagement of all stakeholders. The UK is one of the richest countries in the world, and it's a national disgrace that hundreds of people, rough sleeping, die on the streets of our country each year, including 40-year-old Richard Keogh, who died on the streets of Liverpool earlier this week. In January, Amy Tees, a 30-year-old woman, died on the streets of Liverpool. Amy grew up in the same area as I did. We attended the same school, and both of us lost a parent when we were just 12 years old. I read Amy's story and was moved by the similarity of our backgrounds. There, but for the grace of God, go I. But today is about focusing on what we can do to change things. Both the Mayor of Liverpool's team and the Metro Mayor's team, with stretched resources, work hard to provide solutions, Always Room Inside and Housing First initiatives. Today, our hope is to further engage the private sector, develop understanding and an appetite for engagement. We all have something to either lose or gain. We have carefully chosen our panel and speakers today because of the value we believe they can add to the debate. Once again, I'd like to thank them, our chair, host, and you, the audience. I hope collectively we can continue to care and, more importantly, take action. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rae. A great start. Understanding first. It's a very complex issue. No one better to explain it than Jon Sparkes here at Crisis. Recently did a fantastic report, everybody in 2018. He was busy late last night. He travelled up to be with us. We're delighted to have you with us, Jon. So please, the floor is yours. Many thanks. Jon Sparkes.
Good morning, and first of all, just thank you for your interest and in being here at all. Homelessness is an issue that affects 170,000 families and individuals nationally and reflects on our society and the choices we have made. So just by being here and showing your interest and hopefully some commitment to solving the problem is a great place to start. And let me just say right up front, solving the problem. Not hiding it, not removing it from sight, but solving it, ending it. In the 15 minutes or so I just want to talk about 4 things before I hand over to Karl, who's going to tell you about homelessness from his very personal experience. Firstly, just to give you a sense of scale and the nature of homelessness. Secondly, to talk about some of the bigger picture policy solutions. Then to look at what's working in the City of Liverpool and in Liverpool City region, and maybe a little bit about what doesn't work. And then finally, to ask the business community, what can you do? And possibly to make some suggestions myself as to what you might do. Many of you will have seen people sleeping rough today. I'm pretty certain that all of you will have seen people sleeping rough in the last few days. I know I certainly have. But let's just stress that's the tip of the iceberg. It's the most dangerous form of homelessness, but it is only one form and probably one of the smallest in terms of the numbers of people. And when I say dangerous, I really mean that. People sleeping rough are 17 times more likely to be the victims of violence than people who aren't sleeping rough. Homeless people are 9 times more likely to commit suicide and on average will die in their mid-40s. Right now in Great Britain, as I say, there are 170,000 individuals or families experiencing the worst forms of homelessness. Sleeping rough, sleeping in places not meant for human habitation, staying in homeless hostels, staying in emergency B&B accommodation, sofa surfing with people they don't even know. That's an awful statistic. About 12,000 people sleep rough on a typical night in Great Britain. And at Crisis and at a very personal level, I don't think that's necessary, and I don't think it's inevitable. There are many, many triggers for homelessness, and the biggest is simply being told by a landlord that your tenancy is ending. That's the single biggest reason why someone becomes homeless. Other people become homeless when they leave prison or when they leave the care system. Others when their relationships break down. Others when they have to deal with the difficulties of turning to drink. And others because they've been the victim of domestic violence. But all those people have one thing in common. We as a society have let them down. We haven't built enough social houses, so people are more reliant on private renting. Rents go up, and then in this country, we've frozen the benefits that pay people on low or no income to access housing, and in some cases, even stop people accessing housing benefits altogether. And frankly, that's not politics, that's arithmetic. If you do those things, homelessness will go up. And because of those things, pressures build up in people's lives, and they start moving towards and into homelessness. And none of us want to live in a country like this. So we've made the choices, but we don't want to live in the country that where those consequences happen. So the really frustrating thing is that there are solutions. There are big solutions like building more social homes and having salaries and benefit levels that enable people to afford somewhere to live. There are practical solutions like quickly resettling people and supporting them when they've experienced domestic violence or the care system or prison or the armed forces or the mental health system or just been in hospital. and tactical and proven solutions like having good, professional, psychologically informed outreach workers with expertise in handling trauma and making sure that there are quick solutions, quick housing solutions to move people into when they are picked up on the street. So before I talk about what works, let's just consider what I mean when I say ending homelessness. It's not a phrase that necessarily comes to mind straight away, but we consulted far and wide on what a sensible definition of ending homelessness might look like. And we're talking about 5 things. Firstly, no one sleeps rough. Secondly, no one sleeps in a place that's not meant for people to live in. Thirdly, anyone who is in temporary or emergency accommodation has a plan to move quickly into mainstream settled housing. Fourthly, nobody becomes homeless just because they leave the care of the state, the care system, prison, the army, the hospital, and so on. And fifthly, if anybody's at risk of homelessness, they get the help they need. Now, those 5 things, I don't know about you, but I think that's not too much to ask, is it? Really not too much to ask to live in a society where those 5 things happen. So let's start looking at some of the answers. So first of all, some of it does rest with government. Not all of the solutions, but some of it does, a lot of it does. Firstly, you've got to have enough homes to house homeless people. And social homes are the things that really do that. We think we're going to need to build 90,000 new social homes every year for the next 15 years just to catch up with the backlog that we've got in this country. And until we have enough really affordable homes, then we need a benefit system that covers people, that actually covers the cost of housing. And the housing benefit element of our benefit system has been disconnected from market rent since 2011. And if you're relying on the market to provide the housing, you've got to have a benefit system which is linked to the market. And we don't have that, and we haven't had that since 2011, but we have to have that. Thirdly, prevention is always better than cure. There's a saying which I unashamedly steal from Greenpeace, which is, if the bath is overflowing, you reach for the taps first, not the mop. You switch the taps off first before you start mopping the floor. And all of our public services need to be attuned to that preventing homelessness has got to be the way to end homelessness, not just helping people when they're at that moment of crisis. And, you know, whether we're talking about prevention or cure, there is one true thing that is the case, and that's that housing people is how we end homelessness. Not hassling them or arresting them because they're on the street. Not even running around town giving them soup and making them prey to every trafficker, slavery recruiter and drug dealer in town. Not lecturing people on whether to give or not give to beggars. Not sticking them in a hostel and hoping for the best. And not waiting for them to deserve or be ready for housing. What works is providing housing and providing the support that people need when they're in that housing. I mentioned the figure of 170,000 earlier. You know, of those 170,000, 152,000 just need a home and the means to pay for it. That's what 152,000 of those 170,000 need. 18,000 need more than that. 18,000 are in the situation where the homelessness has become linked to a mental health issue, an addiction, a way of behaving, a way of living, and those people need what's become known as housing first, which is the most evidenced form of homelessness intervention there is. We know it works for those 18,000 people with the more complex needs. And the answer is get them off the streets, get them out of the hostels and the B&Bs, and get them into a house, and make all the support that they need available to them for as long as they need it, and don't make having the house dependent on accepting the support. Now, some of that feels a bit counterintuitive, and I think for the person who's living next door to the house where someone with that complexity of issue moves in, I'm sure it seems pretty counterintuitive. But it works, and we have to communicate it effectively. If we put people in hostels and wait for them to be ready, about 15% of them will move on into settled housing each year. 85% of them will sleep on the street, sleep in prison, sleep in hostels, sleep in A&E. And even if you don't deal with this from a sense of compassion, those are the most expensive places to sleep if you're the taxpayer. Putting someone in prison or a hostel or a hospital are the most expensive places to sleep if you're a taxpayer. Housing First, on the other hand, is successful 80 to 90% of the time. So it's not perfect, but I know I'd put my money on a solution which was 80 to 90% successful and not one that was 15% successful. And there's some success locally. So Liverpool City has been successful in getting funding from what's called the Rapid Rehousing Pathway. This is a recognition both of the need in Liverpool, but it's also a recognition of the great work that's being done and a commitment to moving forward to prevent homelessness and use housing and housing people as an answer to homelessness. So Liverpool City's got that funding. And I've seen, even just walking here this morning, all of the signs saying, if you're worried about a rough sleeper. So there is clearly some really, really good work going on in the city. And then if you look at Liverpool City region, it's one of the 3 National Housing First pilot areas, which is funded by the government, which, for people living in this region, that says homeless people with complex needs will get the support they need and have the very, very best chance of moving away from homelessness. It also says that for someone in my position, being able to go back to a government and say, look, this stuff works. Don't just do a pilot in 3 areas, scale it up across the country. If it works, it works. And frankly, why we're even bothering with pilots when we know it works is beyond me. But great that at least we are making a start in those 3 areas. I guess the final thing to say on housing, rapid rehousing as we would call it, and Housing First, is it's only going to work if they're not bolt-ons. So don't just add those things onto a system that already exists. Use them as the reason and the stimulus to change the system. Otherwise, they will be expensive bolt-ons and they will work for a small number of people, but not for everybody else. So please do it in a systems way. So I'm really pleased that across this city and this city region, you're seeing people following the evidence and tackling homelessness in a way that isn't happening everywhere else. In fact, I think the only other place that I work where I see it happening in this way is in Scotland. And last year I chaired the Scottish Government's Homelessness and Rough Sleeping Task Force and made a number of recommendations which the Scottish Government thankfully then turned into a national plan for ending homelessness. And part of that is that every local authority in Scotland has now written a transition plan to take it from its current approach to rough sleeping and homelessness to one of rapid rehousing being the default, moving people into settled permanent accommodation being the default and not being the exception for people who we deem are ready. As I said, I'm going to close by just some comments about the business community and how we can all become involved. There's some obvious stuff, first of all, which is don't cause damage. And by that I mean don't put the spikes in front of your building to stop people rough sleeping. Don't do stuff which is just about saying, oh, rough sleepers keep away from my business. And I know the temptation to do that, and I absolutely understand the need for businesses to be able to operate and function properly. But if we want to do something as a business community, start by not doing damage. Secondly, when you see someone, and this isn't about businesses, this is just about people, when you see someone who is rough sleeping, there are enough phone numbers around the city to know precisely what to do. Phone that number and make sure that the help that those people need is given to them. If you see someone who's rough sleeping, who's clearly in distress and in an emergency situation, go one higher, phone 999. This is a person who's in distress and in an emergency situation. Whether they're homeless or not, doesn't matter. Let's get the help they need to them. So those are some very, very small tactical things, but 4 things. There are first 2 quite obvious, but the second 2 probably more important. First of all, do use your company's money. This isn't a fundraising pitch for my organisation, but do use your company's money to fund some of the amazing charities in this area and get your staff to enthusiastically fundraise for them as well. Secondly, get your staff volunteering for charities that support homeless people in the city and city region. Those charities know what they're doing, they've got a way of working, go volunteer for them. Don't just go out and try and do it yourself. But the more important stuff, I'd say, think about what expertise you have in your business. You have IT people. You may be in the business of housing, financial advice, coaching, legal support. You may have equipment and logistics. Think about how those things can be brought to the party to help on homelessness. And fourthly, think about how many people your business talks to, the network of your business. And if you're in any way convinced that we can work together to end homelessness, use that network, get that message out, blow away some of the ill-conceived ideas, and focus your audiences and your networks on the solutions that exist. And my input today isn't about crisis, but what I would say is the Crisis Skylight team here in Merseyside, along with their colleagues and some of the other great charities, Whitechapel Centre and so on, we will do our bit. We'll join in, we'll help, but please, across the business community, lend your weight, lend your influence, and lend your networks to this issue. Now we're going to hear from someone who knows far more about homelessness in Liverpool than I do, and in fact I'd argue that knows more about homelessness in Liverpool than most people in the room. Not that I know who's in the room particularly, but Karl absolutely knows it. And I wish you all the best in the conference today, and please do listen to Karl. Thank you very much.
Morning, everybody. Thanks very much for mentioning Keel and Amy from the heart. It was really appreciated. A lot of you know about the business approach to things, but I hope I'm going to take it down the side of the humanitarian approach, the human approach, just that little bit of contact for the person who's sitting on the street who thinks people are just throwing them away, because that's how you feel like when you're on the streets, like you've just been cast aside like somebody's dirty washing. It really is a shame that we have to sit here and have this conversation, and it's a shame for the people that die on the street. It's a shame for the parents that have to bury them. But I digress, and what I'm going to talk about is me. My story started for me in my teenage years. For decades, I've been in and out of your prisons, in and out of your hostels. I've had drug problems, alcohol problems, because it numbs the pain. It numbs the pain of where you are, because you can't understand where you are. You think it's normal to lie down in a gutter and cover yourself up with a dirty, scabby towel or a sheet or anything, just to keep the warmth in your body, just so you can survive till the next day. And then it's not about survival. It's not about that at all. It's about accepting where you are. It's about people in the room here, usually the business leaders of our communities, most probably in the country. You know what I mean? You accept it. You step over people like me every day of your lives. You don't even have the decency to go, good morning. You're all right, lad? You just said before yourself, mate, and Karen, you know what I mean? You see people now. Just give them that little bit of humanity, that little bit of light. That's what saved my life. People just looking at you and going, you okay, son? You all right, lad? You don't have to give them money. You don't have to go and buy them things. We just lost that little bit of our soul of what it's like to be a human being. And it's okay for yourselves. You live a secluded life away from all the madness. But for us, that madness is real life. This is where we are. We've just been cast aside. We're left. And we're trying to sort problems out. We're trying to move forward. But we haven't got the tools. We don't understand why we are where we are. Because we think it's normal. And we're living in a society, as Jon was saying before, one of the richest in the world. And we're just leaving people to die on the streets. I'm a bit emotional because I found out at the end of the session with Crisis the other day that Richard Keel died. It's a kid who I knew. I'd only known him since 2016. After another spell in prison, I've come out. I'm in your hostel systems. I've got madness in my brain. I'm trying my best to get through my madness, but I've run away from it all my life. I've hid from it. I don't know how to work with it. And your services, trying to get in touch with your services, the time scale takes that long. You need somewhere you can unload, somebody you can sit in and just speak to, somebody to treat you like a human being, to make you feel like you're a person again. You're not just scum, you're not just somebody who's just lying in the gutter, you know, spoiling the look of our city centre. It's not just the city centre, it's the outreaches. You're going to different communities. Joe, you know all about this. You've worked with it. I've seen you on the streets talking to people. You all do. You all see it. But we choose to ignore it. My thing to me, and I hear you talking about economics, and it's a lesson and a half for me in that, because I'm down here. You know what I mean? I'm looking up at all these people. You are the people that can put these plans in place. You can move it forward. You can make us feel like human beings again. Just have a little bit of belief in us. You know what I mean? Give us an out. Show us that we've got a door we can walk through. We can actually step up and go, I'm a human being. All the swears I ever said in my life, and I really didn't want to say it, but I'm glad that I did. Such a small word. Help. That was it. Just a small word. Hardest thing I ever had to do in my life, because you're opening up your weaknesses. You have to share your inhibitions, your fears, all your worry, your stress and everything else. And then you have to sit there and think, wow, my parents are going to bury me. You're lying down and you're begging not to wake up the next day. You're sitting there and you're open. Please, let this be over. I mean, you talk about, here's one thing that's got to me. I'm sorry, I'm going out of script here. Here's one thing that really got to me. You've got on the thing, survivor. You know what I mean? Like it's a war. But where we are in that, it's not a war until you step out of it and you look back at it and you go, have I just put my parents through all that? I went to 6 funerals in 2012 and it broke my heart. This was my breaking point. This was me. You know what I mean? I was sitting there talking to mothers who just buried the sons, buried the daughters, and he was so glad that you were alive. You just buried the kids. Someone they'd nurtured all their lives. And they were so glad that you were still going, you were still alive. But you could see the despair on the faces. What did I do wrong? Why did my child end up like this? And there's no peace for them. Most probably happens till the day they die. It becomes a little bit more bearable. But when you're on this side, when you're on the street, you don't think you're putting people through torture. You don't think you're hurting people. You think you're just living. You're thinking you're just alive. And it's a lot easier at first to survive on the streets, because you're going down and you're begging for money. You're begging for food. You're begging for coffee or tea, anything. But what you're really craving is just somebody to speak to you like a human being. Just somebody to make you realise you're not scum. You know what I mean? You have problems. We can put it together where we can sort your problems out. We can pick you up. You know what I mean? But you've got to want it. You've got to be able to go, just that magic word, help. And then you can discuss and move people on. I've been very fortunate, and I mean really fortunate. As I said, I was in the hostel where I met Keel. I used to watch that kid going to visit his child every other day. Little teddies in his hand and that. And like myself, I actually believe we were okay if we just with our families and everything can magically disappear. It doesn't. The services aren't there for us to just walk into. By the time you've accessed, I've tried this over 20, 30 years, to access services, to sit down, to have a proper discussion with people, but you're not frustrated with all your madness that comes out wrong. So you alienate people straight away. People are like, oh, you know, don't want him near me. You think it's contagious. It's contagious for the person on the street. It's contagious. You're sitting there watching people sitting in doorways, you know, huddling together. Here's how I used to get warm. little bit of an eye-opener for, you know, Concert Square, your underground car parks. Used to wait for cars to come in so I could roll underneath the car and get warmth off the engine. That was my life. This is 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning when you're shivering. You know what I mean? You're that cold, you're numb. Just to get a little bit of warmth off an engine, off a car. That's just me. You've got people sitting behind vents in your big buildings. You know, when you've got your generators and everything else, people go there for warmth, to sleep, so they can get their heads down, so they can get up the next day and go through the nightmare all again. I said just before, I've been fortunate. I got involved with John's firm, Crisis. He actually sat there and spoke to me, discussed with me, helped me to move forward. And we're talking about Steve Rotherham on his House and Fairs project and the ones that Joe has. I got a house. I feel part of the community. People actually discussed me and said, look, here's the services here, lad. Here's where we can move you forward. We can help you to become whole. So I get a chance now to go and speak to somebody from a mental health department. I had somebody from Crisis who helped me regurgitate all my madness. Made a bit of sense of where I was and who I am. I sit there now, I have neighbours to talk to. I'm in college. I mean, like, it's nothing for you. You're all educated people, but for me, it's a big thing. I start my GCSEs in September. I actually start to put a plan into my head where I can have a life. It's all I've ever wanted. But listen, seriously, at the end of the day, it's you and the people in this room. Use what everybody look up to. We know you put structure in society. So I'm begging you from my heart, please do the right thing. Just help the people that need help. Thank you very much for your time.
Words fail. Thank you, Karl. That was hugely moving. Very important. Thank Jon for his analysis and also his compliments on what Liverpool are doing, and then some clear thoughts about what the private sector can do. Do no harm, get in touch, use your expertise, use your networks, all very, very important things, and then movingly illustrated by Karl. And he also said he is getting help and he is getting support in the city centre now. That's a wonderful, I think, experience of understanding where we are. We now want to move into our session on engagement. And Jon's already said Liverpool at the City Council and the City Region are doing very important work. I'm delighted to say we have representatives from both here this morning. Mayor Anderson will come and talk about their work. Frank Rogers from the Combined Authority will come and talk and introduce Steve Rotherham's presentation, in which we can have 20 minutes talking about what is going on and what the challenges are and what we can look forward to. So will you please welcome Joe Anderson, the Mayor of Liverpool. Thank you.
Well, trust me to get the job of following you, Karl. A really moving and passionate contribution there. And we've met on many, many occasions, and so I know a bit about your story and where you've come from, the challenges, the peaks and troughs, and all of the things that you've gone through. You know, I've got a piece of work there. My office often, when I go to events or whatever, provide me with information. And most of the time I just bin it or put it to one side and I don't use it. And usually because I've got those figures and facts and all of the things that we do in my head. And it's interesting to hear Michael, it's interesting to talk Crisis, hear Crisis talk about the work that we do in Liverpool. And I'll be honest with you, I think Crisis and their Homes First initiative, they talked about delivering about 80%. I think you're probably only about 60% right in what you're aiming for and what you're arguing and what you're doing. I don't, I've been at the blunt end of criticisms from Crisis when we opened up Rapley House. I was told not to do it, but the purpose of opening Rapley House was to make sure that migrants that were coming to our city who have no recourse to public funding were able to have somewhere secure to stay and sleep. So what I would like to say and what I would like to do, and it's a real challenge for me, because I think the thing that I pick up from, and I pick it up from a number of organisations that work with people in our city, and I just heard it from Karl, what he wants, what I want, and I guess what I ask you to give to people who are struggling, and I'll come to the point about why people are struggling in a minute, is hope. Is hope. If we give people hope, then they make that next step and that transition from where they are because they know there's hope for them. And that's what I try to do with everything that we do and the support that we give. I can tell you about all of those details there. The fact that when Crisis talked about that we spent £300 million in housing benefits in Liverpool a year. £300 million. Manchester, probably 400 million. Birmingham, 600 million. Bristol, 700 million. Billions and billions of pounds get spent in supporting housing benefits. And so it's right to say we have not got enough social housing, secure tenancies for people in not just this city, but across the country. And so everybody was inspired by the rhetoric of the big society in 2010. It's a complete failure. It's a complete no-nonsense strapline because we are failing. When Richard Keogh or Amy die on tents in our streets, we've all failed. I've failed, no matter what we do. I can stand here and tell you that what we do in this city with the challenges, the funding crisis that we face is better than any other city in the country. And it is. Is it enough? No, it isn't. Do we have to do things differently? Yes, we do. Do we have to keep fighting the fight and trying to make a difference in people's lives? Yes, we do. Do we need more resources to tackle it? Yes, we do. Not just money, but more voluntary sector, more people given hope, so that when Karl gets an opportunity to have his GCSE or before, you're giving him a job. You're telling him, you achieved that, Karl, and I'm going to be there for you when you come through, and I'm going to give you the job. So the private sector have a role to play in mentoring and giving hope. We have a role to play as local governments, and national governments have a role to play. When we talk about the challenges that we face, we have to also recognise that every individual is different. Every single individual is different. The two people that have just lost their lives were chronic drug users. Sticking them into a house without that support, and if we haven't got the finance or the resources to give them that support, okay, Homes First or the money from government might enable us to do some of that. But without that support, without that ability to give them hope and to actually give them a route map, a plan on what's going to change in their lives, we're wasting our time. Because I've seen in this city people who've got houses but are still on the streets begging, still serious users of drugs. And that's a failure as a whole. It's a failure of a system failure. The NHS, the justice system, local government, national government, everybody, it's a failure. And we've got to recognise that, and we've got to shake the paradigm, we've got to do things differently. Homes First is trying to do that, and we say about the model in Scandinavia and different places across Europe where this type of approach does work. But it's still not good enough, and it's still got to mean we do so much more locally to tackle our own issues. And part of the problem for me is no matter what we do as a city council, we'll get criticised. Somebody who works in the council, who not long come to Liverpool, was telling me they were out in the city a couple of nights ago, and within 10 a couple of 100 metres, they were accosted 10 times by people begging, and often he described it as in-your-face begging, people challenging and demanding money. The 2 people that died were in tents. We can no longer allow that. I've got to say, I'm sorry, but we're not going to allow tents to be put up in the city when we've got accommodation for you. Because what goes on behind that tent, I don't know. And if people like Amy and like Richard are using drugs in that, we can't see it, then we can't help them. So we've got to do something. It's tough love. So, I personally, my plea, and it has been to the private sector, I can't do this alone in the city. The council can't do it alone. The money we spend, whether it's in discretionary housing, we spend £12 million preventing people from becoming homeless because of the challenges of universal credit, because of the demands placed on people, often in work, who can't afford to pay the rent, even though they're claiming housing benefits. We top that up. We don't have to, but we spend £4 million a year on what we call discretionary housing fund to help them stay in that. Otherwise, they're out on the streets. Then we've got to face up to the fact that drug use and drug misuse is a major, major problem. And without actually getting people to accept that they can transform their lives with our support and with our help, getting them from A to B, giving them hope, that's the challenge for us. And that's where the private sector can help, through either mentoring, working with us to take somebody under your wing, give somebody a job, give somebody hope. That's how we're going to transform this. It can be done. There is absolutely no question. But what can't be done is believing that there is one single approach or one single answer to this, because there isn't. Because I've been on the streets, as Karl said, and I've offered people accommodation. I've said to them, we'll get you and we'll get you the support. No, I'm all right, Joe. I just want to go to the back of the museum where with my mates and I'm all right and I don't get any pressure and I want to jack up. And that's what people... So we've got to be tough. We've got to give tough love. We've got to help them change, and we've got to help them want to transform their own lives. But we can only do that if we give them the support that they need. Because I can throw more money at it. If that 12 million a year that we spend preventing homelessness, or the £59 million a year, £59 million every single year we spend with crisis loans, with giving people who are on universal credit who've been sanctioned, 59 million from one of the poorest cities in the country, that's what we give every single year. I could build 2,000 houses every single year, but will it help solve the problem of mental health, drug addiction, alcohol addiction, or the issues that people face, no self-worth, feeling low, feeling depressed, feeling down? No, it isn't. It's a joined-up approach that helps people transform their lives. That's what we've got to do. That's what the challenge is for us today. That's what we should be discussing and debating, how the private sector can help us as a council, help the voluntary sector, help the charities, and help those on the streets transform their lives. Let's look at giving people hope. If we give people hope, then I know we can make a real difference. And that's my message to you today, is work with us to actually make sure that we offer people hope. And we can work providing accommodation, we can work, we're talking about Rapley House is so successful. It's the only, named after the patron saint of homelessness, by the way, Benedict Joseph Rapley. We're building a new one. We're building a new one, not because we're saying that the situation is going to get out of hand and grow, but because we want a if you like, one-stop shop approach, so that when somebody goes in to seek a night of safety, we're actually getting engaged with them, we're talking to them, we're providing them with the opportunity to engage and talk, to say, what is it you're here, why are you here in the city, what is your problem, what can we help solve you with? How can we provide accommodation? How can we provide you with top-ups and benefits? How can we get you into education? How can we get you into an employment? So all of those things are done. So we're actually building a new one, and by this time next year, or the end of next year, we should have another one built. That's the approach that we've got to have, one that joins up everybody here to try to help us find that solution. But it's got to be based on giving people hope. And that's what I want to see from today's conference, and hopefully we'll talk about that. Thank you.
Brilliant, Joe. A chance of private sector and offering hope. Many thanks for that. Can I ask Frank Rogers, Chief Executive of the Combined Authority, to represent the Liverpool City Region Combined Authority? Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think Joe made a comment about how do you follow Karl, how do I follow both of them? So, first of all, I'd like to apologise for Steve Rotherham. He was desperate to attend this morning's event. Unfortunately, there's been a rescheduled transport for the North session that Steve's had to attend. He was hoping he was going to be able to bring Andy Burnham with him as well to this, but they're at the same event. So Steve apologises, but what we have done, we've pulled together very hastily a quick video because Steve did want to play a part in today's session. So I'm going to run through Steve's video, and then I'll just make a couple of comments on Steve's behalf after that.
After nearly a decade of austerity, our communities are hurting, and there can be no greater symbol of the inequality that runs so deeply through our country than people sleeping in doorways and on benches in our town centres. Each person's experience and the journey that led them to becoming homeless in the first place is of course different, but once they're on the streets, they find it very difficult to recover. We need a collaborative effort across the city region to support everyone out of homelessness. So I'm delighted that so many business leaders are in attendance today to discuss this important topic. As you've just heard, our local authorities are working tirelessly to support people who are already homeless. But we must continue to work together to both address the immediate issues and look at systemic changes that can reduce the need for services in the future. Liverpool City Region is one of 3 areas involved in the National Housing First pilot, which aims to break the cycle of homelessness by delivering targeted, wraparound support to people with a history of unstable housing and or homelessness. It'll provide flexible support for as long as it is needed, and crucially, it places an individual in a home urgently, without delay, and then seeks to help them address the issues that they face. Housing First has already proven to be successful internationally, having been tried in both North America and Scandinavia. So we're working with partners from those countries to make sure we successfully deliver it at scale for the first time in the UK. Our approach builds on the great work that our local authorities already do in such trying circumstances, and will see us work closely with housing associations and the private rented sector to ensure we get the best results by having housing that is immediately available. In the 6th richest country in the world, no one should be without a place to call home, and with Housing First, we can start to address this problem once and for all.
So I think Steve's echoed the message that I think Joe has touched on there. It's about working in partnership, it's about public, it's about private, it's about third sector. We need to work collaboratively to look to address this issue. The CA is working closely with all of its constituent local authorities. The local authorities are the CA, they are the membership of the CA. And we want to work with you, the business community, and we want to work with the whole community within our city region to make sure that we try and support moving people out of homelessness, because it is critical. John earlier mentioned Housing First, Steve's just mentioned it there. It was part of Steve's manifesto commitment for becoming Metro Mayor of the City Region. He put that into his manifesto document. He did it before we got the funding sanction from central government, and he's been committed to delivering on Housing First since he's been elected. Joe's right, we haven't got enough. It's not the full solution, it's a component in the solution. But what we have got, we've got 7.7 million of Housing First funding over 3 years, and we've got £2.2 million worth of Homelessness Trailblazer over a 2-year period. It is nowhere near enough, but it is a start for us, and it will enable us to move on a journey that will hopefully improve things for the people in our city region who are experiencing homelessness. We've been planning carefully for the rollout because we want to try and make sure we get it right. We didn't want to jump into, this is what we think will work quickly, let's get it moving and let's go for some quick results, but then repent at leisure that we didn't get it right. So we have taken our time over it. We've learned from what Liverpool and the other local authorities are doing, and we're working collaboratively with the local authorities and with the housing associations to understand how we can move into a better space. But we are now in a place where we can start to recruit the first teams to help us deliver on the Housing First agenda. We are contacting Karl and people who have got that learned experience to make sure that we recruit the right people, and we will be using help, support and advice from Karl and those people with that lived experience to make sure we get that team right and able to deliver on the objectives of Housing First. I think it's right that we thank Jon for some of the support that Crisis have given us. We've had Kate seconded in from Crisis. But we're on a journey. We've got a long, long way to go. But I think you will pick up from Steve's video there that he is committed to work collaboratively across the whole city region to deliver on this. It will require an element of system reform. I'll repeat again, it is not the answer. It is a component of the answer, and there are a whole series of components to that. But we do hope that Housing First will be a valuable new service that can support the most vulnerable in our city region. The support of the housing associations across the city region is critical in this as well. And we've had great support to date. We want to see that continuing, and we want to see that growing, because we need them to work with us to enable us to deliver services and to deliver homes for the people who need them most. We'll continue that collaborative working with the local authorities to provide joined-up services to enable us to support people who are experiencing homelessness across our city region. But we need a combination of approach. It's not one thing will solve the problem, but the combination of approaches has to be coordinated, and it has to be strategic if we are going to deliver sustainable, long-term change in relation to the homelessness challenge that we all face. It can't just be a set of bolt-ons, as Jon touched on earlier. It has to be strategic and it has to be coordinated. But I think critically, as everyone has said before me, we've got to make it work, because really failure isn't an option in this area. Thanks.
Out of all that, hope, realism, collaboration, we started this further to go. Extraordinary set of speeches. There is not enough time to ask people to take questions at this point. What I want to do, if I may, is move on to our panel. We'll have a conversation with the panel, at which point I'd like to open up to a conversation with the audience. You can raise questions, make comments out to the panel, or our colleagues in the front row. So if I could ask our panelists to join me over here, please. As earlier, it's Bronwen Rapley, the Chief Executive Officer of Onward Housing Association, Stephen Connolly, the State Director of Liverpool 1, Denise Banks, who's Commercial Director of Gaskells Wastes, Andy Cooke, Chief Constable of Merseyside Police, and Peter Morris here of Liverpool Football Club. Brilliant, many, many thanks. We did want in this session to dig under the surface. We've had a lot of macro analysis. We want to have the perspectives of individuals and organisations who are front line on this, different kinds of perspectives. I've asked them all to think about their own individual institutional experience, to think about what might work, but particularly challenge the audience of, in the future, how they might help. So now I've got my microphone on, I'm going to turn it off. Thanks very much. If I do that again, please tell me. And I said I'd start by asking Bronwen Rapley, CEO of Onward, her reflections, observations and recommendations. So Bronwen, please, thanks.
Thank you very much. So I'm the Chief Executive of Onward Homes, which some of you will know in Liverpool. It's a part of our organisation. It's called Liverpool Housing Trust. So for the last 50 years and more within this Liverpool and the city region, we've been doing what we can to address the problems of homelessness. And I wanted to pick up on a couple of points that have been made and then talk a little bit about what we're doing and then talk about what the community can do to help. I think the first point I do want to reinforce is how important it is to have support, that it isn't just about a home, it is about the support to live in it. But equally, this is about poverty. And I think that one of the very shocking statistics that Jon shared with us about the number of people, I think you said 150,000, who just need a home. They just need a place to live and the money to fund it. And actually, I think perhaps for the first time in my career, that massive gap between the funding that is available to people and the cost of a home is a challenge here in our city as much as it is elsewhere. So what are we doing at Onward? Well, charity starts at home. And so first of all, we work with our tenants to sustain their tenancies. That's a really important part for us. We have around 12,000 homes here in the city region. We want to make sure that every tenant of ours is able to stay in their home and sustain it. And we work very hard with them to provide both the support and the financial support that they need to access funding and benefits, etc. We also provide some specialist tenancy support. For example, we run a service that supports people who are hoarding, which is one of the reasons why some tenancies break down. We run specialist provision at Knowsley, so we have around 42 self-contained flats that have helped around 200 homeless individuals in Knowsley this year. And one of the consequences of the homelessness challenge is that our homes are always oversubscribed, so we have massive demand for our properties. We also have not always the right property in the right place. It's a real challenge for us at the moment around one-bedroomed homes. That's partly because of the bedroom tax and the consequences of that. So having the right property in the right place is quite a challenge. One of the ways that we're dealing with that is converting some small two-bedroom terrace properties to one bedroom by moving the bathrooms that are delightfully placed quite close to the lounge up into one of the bedrooms upstairs. So there is quite a lot we can do in investing in our existing to make properties that are suitable. And of course we're working with the Combined Authority in the City on the Housing First project. So how do we think the issue can best be addressed? The need for more funding is just inescapable. It is absolutely inescapable. We don't have enough homes. We don't have the right homes in the right places. There is a need for more funding. And the argument for capital funding is absolutely critical. If we don't build and we don't provide enough homes at the right time, then we end up paying for expensive bed and breakfast, or I think as someone else pointed out, some of the most expensive accommodation in A&E. And so thinking about where we invest is critical. I think there is just a real truth that benefits are insufficient to live on, and particularly when you add sanctions into that. And again, during my career, this is the first time that I think I would have said that, but there is insufficient funding. I think the other thing that I would mention is that it's really important for us to listen to the people who are involved, the people who have experienced homelessness, to try to understand what the solutions might be. I think we're very good as a public and a quasi-public sector in telling people what we think the answer is. And it's been really good to hear from Karl today. It's also been really positive to see that in many of the services, we're starting with the people to say, what is it you need? So starting with that. But fundamentally, any addressing of the issue has to be around collaboration. This has got to be seen as our problem. It's not the council's problem, it's not the government's problem, it's our problem, and we will only address it if we work together. So what can the private sector do? Please don't underestimate the value of raising funds. It may seem like one of the simplest things that you can do, but actually your money counts, and raising funds and giving them to charities in a way that is unrestricted, that allows them to meet some of the really boring stuff that they have to do, like paying for their electricity, those kind of things can be really helpful. It's been mentioned before, but I'll reinforce it. Share your skills and expertise with the sector. Actually, many charities really value whatever skills you bring. I work with a charity in Manchester, if I can mention that here. I work with a charity in Manchester, and we've worked with John Lewis, who provided loads of help for us on the retail and the logistics. We have a close affiliation with Pets at Home, who've supported us on training. Really important skills that you can bring. Use your political influence and lobby. It's very helpful for those of us who are in the sector. If people who are out of sector say the same message, people listen differently. So where you have influence and where you have networks, please lobby. And then think about your employment practices. Significant numbers, around 40,000 of homeless families are in work. Are there practices in the way that you employ your staff that actually contribute to that? And so think about your practices, the level of employment that you offer, the way that you pay. Is there something you can do there? And then the final one from me is, can you think about slow employment? Many of the people who have experienced difficulty, who are out of work, will not get back into work first time, will not get back into work straight away. What they need is a gentle reintroduction back into work, and maybe more patience than you normally give, and maybe more support than you could normally give. And if you can think of areas in your business where you might be able to practice slow employment, then that might also be a way you can contribute.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Just rehearse. Value your money, giving to charity, share your skills, use your political influence, think about practices in work and pay, and think about slow employment. Some really chunky, specific things. Marvellous, Bronwen. Steve Connolly, presumably now running Liverpool 1, the best mixed-use development in Western Europe, an absolute star, changed our city along with other colleagues. Brilliant. I'm sure that at the front end, the sharp end as well. So, Stephen, your thoughts and reflections, please.
So Liverpool 1, what's our sort of interaction with the whole homeless topic and the reason we're here today to talk about? Well, we have a 24-hour team in Liverpool 1, so our team is out there on the ground throughout the day. So we naturally interact with homeless people as they come through the estate. Sometimes, yes, we do move them on, and that's been talked about earlier, and we're moving them on to other organisations. Our challenge is, how do we do this so that it's a positive addition to their lives, to move them on, rather than just being almost a sticking plaster solution. At the moment, to be honest with you, all we're doing is moving the problem. We're not part of the solution. And as a private sector, we want to be part of the solution. We're actively asking, via these kind of forums, as to what more we can provide. There's a story, I was talking to the team earlier this week, and there's a story in January, one of our coldest nights in January, and there weren't many people on the streets actually around Liverpool on that particular evening, but there was a couple on our estate that we came across. Whenever we find people on the estate, we always talk to them. I mean, Karl, your talk earlier was very powerful and very resonant, I thought, about how you want to be interacted with. And I believe our team do that very well. We talk to people, we try and help them, we always try and find a space for them. And there was a couple. And they were cold. They were under a blanket. They were shivering. The team took them in. We found them. We made the phone calls. We found them accommodations for them to go to. And we thought we'd done the end of our job at that point. And we went back to the team, and we found the two individuals. We tell them where we can go to. We were going to get them a taxi to where they can go to. And the two people said no. They wouldn't go. They're a couple. And they realised that when they went to that place, they would be split up. And they weren't prepared to do that. And they gathered their things off and they went around into the city. And I don't know where they went to after that. That's a very sad story. And we want to help. We want to be part of that solution. But in that instance, we weren't able to actually affect the solution that was going to help those people.
what do we do as an organisation that can help as a private sector? And there's been a lot of talk about, it's a multifaceted approach, isn't it? We know that we have individuals that we move on, as I've said, but these individuals come back. They almost come back on a cycle. It's almost they go to one part, we might not see them for a few days, maybe even a few weeks, but there's a certain section of people that will come back to us. So again, what have we done to actually provide that long-term solution? We're a private enterprise. We don't have the skills that a lot of people in this room have. We look to you to help provide those skills. What I do see, though, is that the problems that these people are having are individual problems. It's not one problem, one solution fits all. Many people on these streets have multitude of issues, which will require a multitude of agencies to actually help them on. Housing is certainly part of that, but there's mental health issues that form part of that. There's drug issues, there's dependency issues, there's abuse issues in the home, etc. And I suppose we would be looking to work with other organisations to help. How do we facilitate that? We can act as that first point of call. We can act as that opportunity to signpost these other organisations. We can be that door opener and actively want to be. We struggle to know how to do that. We struggle to know where to send them. We struggle to know what are these options. That's not our specialty. Our specialty can be that facilitator. The final thing I'd like to say before I move on is that we've talked a lot about money being part of the solution. We've talked about us all working together being part of that solution. I think there's another part that is actually quite an important and often overlooked part to this, and that's the public. The public are part of our solution. The public are part of that group of people that are actively going out there in a very humanistic way, are trying, they give money, members of the public will talk to those people. But I'd like to think that via this kind of forum, that we remember we need to bring up the public with us. We need to bring them as part of the solution. We need to allow them to have their say and help our city move forward. We're a generous city. We always have been. They would want to be involved with this. So I definitely think that needs to be part of the strategy. As a private sector, what skills can we give? Well, we have other skills than necessarily we talk about in this room. We have marketing skills. We know how to get a message out there. We know how to talk to people. We know how to affect change. That's what we do. I want people to come to Liverpool and spend in our retail establishments. We know how to do that. We can use those skills to help other organisations get messages across. We can, affect relationships. It's almost, you need to think about Liverpool One and like-minded organisations in a slightly different way. We can help. It's not necessarily in a direct way. We can facilitate. Thank you.
Stephen, that was really very interesting because various colleagues this morning have said, think about the ways in which you can help. You're not housing providers, but I thought that about changing hearts and minds, marketing, presentation, doing what you can do as opposed to what you're not set up to do. That's really very, very interesting. Thank you for that. Denise Gaskell, Head of Commercial Service at... please.
Don't wish that on me.
No. You have a particular kind of challenge, I think, in your industry, in what you do first thing in the morning and finding people stuck in your bins. And you're also, I think, very involved in Whitechapel. So please, your thoughts on the problem, what might be done, and how the private sector can continue to help and do even more.
Well, for us, the problem really is twofold as a business. One, we're a service sector business, servicing probably around 7,000 customers overall in the North West and Wales and Cheshire, by way of emptying bins. That's what we do. That's how we make our money, empty commercial bins. So, two things there. One, when we send our drivers and trucks to collect those bins, particularly in the city centre of Liverpool, more often than not, we are presented with a problem by way of a homeless person asleep in one of those bins. And the other issue presented to us, if it's affecting our business like that, then it's also potentially affecting the 7,000 customers' businesses that, you know, that we service. If it's affecting those businesses, then in turn the negative, it's going to affect ours. I've been in the waste industry now for about 20 years, and the situation does seem to be getting a lot worse. As our business has grown, the routes of each of those trucks changes. Those routes are constantly changes. And what we find is a bin which may well, for example, get serviced at 7:30 ordinarily on a Tuesday morning, if we win more work in that area, it may well be that that bin in turn will get serviced at 4 o'clock in the morning. And as a result of that, a homeless person who thinks they are safe and warm, and generally they are, and it doesn't sound a very appealing thought, I suppose, sleeping and taking refuge in a bin. But, you know, if it's cold and windy and rainy outside, or you're at the risk of being attacked, then that's what I would do. That's where I would sooner be. So, in changing those routes, quite often, our drivers are presented with lifting a bin with potentially a person in that bin who, in turn, could end up in the back of the bin truck. That has happened 10 years ago in a past life at another waste company about 20 miles up the M62. We had a very large, they're called FEL containers, they're like a skip with a plastic lid. Very safe, very warm. A married couple lived in this container for about 2 years with their dog, and we changed the route and the driver, and that new driver in turn lifted that container. And thankfully, with the technology that was in place on the truck, they were identified by way of the cameras, and that potentially they could have gone into the back of the truck. So it's a very, very real prospect, and it's one that we're faced with every single day, and that's how it affects our business. Financially, it's affected our business by way of, as a result of that, we've invested in weighing technology, for example, which is fitted to the back of every truck. So any exceptional weights, say, for example, over 150 kilos, that tells the driver, really properly check that bin. Although the driver's kicked the bin and he's lifted the lid and he's had a look and he's made his presence known to whomever may or may not be sleeping in the bin, you know, in town alone, we collect about 1,200 wheelie bins of waste a week, 7 days a week. So although we are as prevalent as we possibly can be, that weight information is crucial for us. Now, that isn't a mandatory thing in the industry. It's something that we've invested in for the health and safety of our customers, as well as the staff on our trucks, as well as the general public. In addition to that, we've invested in camera technology on every single truck, so we can spot if anybody show. This sounds a bit overkill, but I can't stress to you enough how many people sleep in bins. I think the statistics were that I read last week, 11 people have been killed in 7 years as a result of being crushed in the back of a bin truck. So that's how it affects us as a business. We're constantly reinvesting in training our drivers, etc., etc. As a result of this problem that we feel seems to be getting worse, we thought, right, what can we do as a waste business that doesn't know anything about homeless people and how to tackle it and why there are so many problems and which force people to live on the streets. We thought, right, okay, well, let's get in touch with some experts. What can we do to help? And that's what we did. So we work very closely with the Whitechapel Centre. We, I think, give them significant financial funding each year by way of offering them free waste services, which is a massive amount of money that they can then use to do what they are good at, rather than spend it on emptying, having the bins emptied. That's worked really, really well for us and them as well. We invested in a brand new truck, which was all logoed up with the Whitechapel Centre telephone number, contact details, etc., etc. And all of our bins in town have stickers on the front of them, as do other waste providers as well, warning of the dangers of sleeping in bins. So that was the initial thing that we thought that would help. When we went back to the staff, I have to say, people's perceptions at work of helping homeless people were incredibly mixed, really. We got a lot of, well, why can't they just go and get a job, as you do? They don't understand the complex nature of why people are homeless in the first instance. But I have to say, in the last 2 years of our staff getting involved in the fundraising that we do with the Whitechapel, we did a truck pull, I think it was at Liverpool Airport last year, that was fun. Everton Football Club won that trophy. And raised many thousands of pounds. So it's little things like that, I think, and now the staff's perception of homeless people is quite different. And I think as a business and as an employer, culturally, there needs to be change with some businesses. Well, most businesses. We have, I think, an excellent open door policy at work, whereby any member of our staff can come to whomever. Not everybody's got the luxury of the HR department we have. Whereby if they've got problems at home with money, with mental health issues, etc., 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 you know, we help. Just last week, we're not fancy. We just work out of porter cabins in Bootle. You know, we'd sooner spend our money on trucks. I sit in a corner of a very large room, and I was really thrilled that a lad in accounts came to me and asked me, could he have a loan of £500? He explained why, which he didn't need to, but he wanted to. And he had nowhere to turn, and he was in debt. He couldn't get a loan conventionally. Had I have said no, I'm guessing he would have gone to one of the loan sharks, of which there are many. That loan could have been 500 quid, it could have been 50, it could have been £5,000. We would have still give it him. But my point is, I was quite pleased that he felt comfortable to come to me direct, which is testament, I think, really to how we run our company. And we're quite proud of that. So I think that from a business point of view, I would urge people to maybe look at the culture, look at the people that work for them, and, you know, ask them, are they okay that day? Have they got any problems at home? Can they help? And I think that's very, very important. Ex-offenders, I have to say, we employ about 6. 2 of which, I'd just like to say about these 2, have offered our business so much and would have been written off if it were not for the culture that we embrace at work. One guy worked for us for about 2 years, got himself into trouble and spent 2 years in prison. He's now out of prison, he works for us. We kept his job open because he was very, very good at what he does. He was very stupid in doing a silly thing in the first place, but, you know, he's a good lad and he works very hard for us. Another gentleman I met 3 years ago, he was working in an abattoir in Wales, and I really liked him, and I just took to him, really. And he now has got a job. He earns £50,000-60,000 a year. He has a company car, all the laptop, mobile, and he works incredibly hard for us because he is so grateful for the opportunity that we gave him. Again, as I say, both of those would have been written off. I'd also like to say, you know, paying people the living wage rather than, you know, just the national minimum wage. We pay well above the living wage, and I think, again, as businesses, it's something that you should look at. You know, there are many people who are in professional jobs and who still cannot or struggle to maintain, you know, a half-decent quality of life. So I think with that, getting your staff involved in fundraising, you know, really looking at employing ex-offenders or ex-addicts, etc., and as well as, you know, businesses coming together, I think, locally, forming possibly a business group where, I don't know, we got together once a month or once a quarter to discuss your problems, your constraints, what you're fed up with, and what you should think should happen, on what you can do to help. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. That's brilliant, actually. Denise, thanks. I mean, a very human approach to the issues involved. I think presumably shock to all is about people living in bins to be saved, the numbers who've died, the risk involved. But I thought that positive thing about what you do, you support Whitechapel giving free waste services, the point about working with your employees and their perceptions of the problem and trying to change those perceptions, which is something that Stephen was talking about. Then I thought your challenge to employers about cultural change, what you do in terms of open door to your employees, helping them with possibly loans, then paying good wages, getting your staff involved. Loads and loads of very interesting, supportive, concrete things that can be done. So marvellous, and we can discuss that in due course. Many thanks for that. I will now pass the microphone on to the Chief Constable on the side, Andy Cooke, who will reflect on his experience of these challenges. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm acutely aware that a third of this audience are being treated far more favourably than the rest because they can't see me at the moment. So, Steve, can we swap places just for 1 minute?
Oh, I like this. This is real leadership from the top. The Chief Constable moved his seat. That's fabulous.
Thank you. I'm not being a cynical police officer, but the first thing that I will say is that let's take off the rose-tinted spectacles and realise that we've got a real problem here. And Joe, I think you're absolutely spot on. People might not think this, but Joe and I agree on an awful lot of things. And absolutely agree with the points that were made there. No one's going to come over the hill and give us billions of pounds to solve this problem. The solution to the problem is in this room here. I'm working with everyone who's prepared to do this. So on that basis, a few years ago, policing used to arrest about 250 homeless people every year because that was the only solution to the problems and the complaints we were getting. We no longer take that approach. We do, don't get me wrong. We use enforcement where enforcement is necessary. And on occasion, enforcement is necessary. And we will use criminal behaviour orders where that is necessary too, on the occasions that it is. Because for every Karl, every success story, there's 100 failures. Not through want to trying, not through compassion, and compassion is great, but this is an issue that we need to approach with compassion, but try and dispassionately solve the problem. Because compassion can drive the wrong behaviours. I was walking through the city the other morning and there was a young homeless man there with 7 sandwiches next to him. And that's lovely. People want to help. But what a waste of money. Because all those 7 sandwiches weren't going to be eaten. They were all from different companies. Someone hadn't come round and done that. Members of the public had done that. That money could have been spent in a far better way. So the points that have been made so far, I agree. We need to separate the genuine homeless issues, the genuine mental health issues, from the organised begging issues, from the issues around those with income who are begging to supplement that income. And we need to be very clear about what the city's approach to this is. And it is about diversion, about support, and about prevention. We work very closely with local authorities, Whitechapel, and other great organisations across this. We have a police officer who, for 20 hours of their week, is deployed solely to addressing these issues. And as I said, people want to help. People know this is an issue that needs addressing. But the way that they help on occasions, Joe mentioned before the tents, that increases the problems. But no one's thought about that. They've thought the right thing to do for this individual is to bring a tent. It's not the right thing to do. It causes problems with increasing addictions. It causes problems with people thinking they're doing the right thing to support. And I don't blame the individuals. They have compassion. This is a very compassionate region. But we need to change the way that people donate towards this to make sure that we're working as one together for it. In my view, we need to have a third sector agency who advertises fully, who everyone makes very clear they are the agency that we donate to help homeless people. so we can together fund the same issues. That's not popular, I accept that. But we need to have one approach to doing this, not 15 different approaches. And Manchester actually does this quite successfully. We need to inform the public that there's always room inside. It's a very easy and clear message, but there is. This area has provided enough beds for everyone. Not everyone wants those beds, and I can understand that. Some people have the pets, some people want to be able to take drugs, and they can't in Labrae House and other places, and I fully accept that. But there is enough room for everyone to have a bed for the night. We need to encourage and support that. Landlords. We need to put more pressure on landlords to support tenants who are in financial difficulties. We need to get ahead of it. We need to make sure that we're doing all we can as agencies to do that. Because a lot of these individuals need our help, and it can be, as has been mentioned plenty of times before, prevented. Our RSLs, a lot of them do a great job, but can do more. And not all of them do a great job. We need to get that consistency across the RSLs. My own view is that we need a non-political regional ambassador who is the face of our approach to homelessness, who will lead the messaging, will educate the public, will draw people together so we can make a difference as a region and not as different parts of a region. We need to make sure we've got long-term addiction services, not short-term, long-term addiction services. And we need to all work together to ensure that is the case. And finally, two things. We need to market our successes. We need to explain to the public why we are doing a lot of things well, and we are. The Department of Community and Local Government will say Merseyside is leading the way in this, Liverpool is leading the way in this. So an awful lot of things we're doing right. And the final point, which won't make everyone happy, there's a counter-argument to this. We need to support our local businesses. The local restaurant owner who has 6 or 7 homeless people sat outside in the street is going to see their business suffer. Because people don't want to be eating a meal and looking at 6 or 7 homeless people across the street. So there's a counterbalance for this, which is why sometimes we will move people on, we will take enforcement action, etc. This is about improving the region for everyone. For the homeless, for our businesses, for every resident. So as I say, we need to show compassion, but we need to be dispassionate in solving the problem.
Andy, brilliant. Compassion, but dispassionate. Joe's word, I think, was tough love. Thoughts about how we donate and having a single repository so we can donate. Need to tell people there's always room inside. Putting landlords under pressure, and some comments about RSLs one might come to. The non-political ambassador to educate the public. Mark our successes and recognise the need of business. Some very challenging stuff in there. Many thanks, and you can take it up with Andy in a moment. Last but not least, delighted, the return of the Scouts diaspora. Peter Moore, come back from a hugely successful career abroad to now manage our hugely successful football club. That all goes without saying, but the football club is doing a huge amount, along with Everton, in its community, very conscious of these issues. Liverpool Foundation does a huge amount. So, Peter, your thoughts and reflections, please.
Thank you, Michael. I'll start with a personal perspective of where I've lived over the last 40 years, as you can tell, even though I was born in Sefton General Hospital and grew up on Scotty Road. This accent doesn't sound like it at all. I've lived in the United States for the last 40 years. And I've had actually the honor and the privilege of living in the San Francisco Bay Area for the most part of that. I moved there in the mid-'80s to follow my career. An absolutely beautiful part of this world. Many of you will have been to San Francisco, but one that probably is faced with the biggest homelessness problem
of any major city in the world. And I'll talk through what I, as a citizen of that city, have seen over the last 30 years. I moved there in the mid-'80s. Beautiful city, already a wealthy city, nothing like it is today. I moved during the height of the AIDS crisis, which was the epicenter, of course, was San Francisco. And we started to see the displacement of people on the streets. Now, let me give you a data point of right now. San Francisco as a city is about 48 square miles. Liverpool as a city is about 43 square miles. There are 7,499 people counted in the homelessness audit last year on the streets of San Francisco. We are probably counted in the hundreds here in the city. I'm not saying that to tell you that we don't have a problem here. I am saying that if we don't face the problem we have here, the growth of this city, the development of the wealth in this city over the next 10 to 20, 30 years will have the same effect if we don't recognize what has happened in places like San Francisco, learn by some of the challenges and failures, absolute abject failure in San Francisco, despite many, many hundreds of millions of dollars every single year applied to those people. They are now feeling it in the last 2 years. Conventions are pulling out. People are not going. Visitor numbers are dropping. And the feedback you see every single time is that they cannot go to a city where homelessness is so pervasive. And the downsides of homelessness, feces in the streets, syringes, huge issue. It went from AIDS, it then went to crack cocaine. Today, it's methamphetamine. It is hugely an issue, not only in the Bay Area, major American cities, it's true, but wealthy city, liberal politics, people that are guilty. This is the home of Apple. This is the home of Google. This is the home of Facebook. There are more millionaires per square meter in San Francisco Bay Area than anywhere else in the world. And what the people who work at these companies have is this massive amount of guilt. So to the point that Andy just made of delivering sandwiches, no, it doesn't work. That fuels drug habits. That exacerbates the issue. And I have seen this and watched this with dismay. And it is not an easy problem for the successive mayors, whether it was Jerry Brown, Art Agnos, Frank Jordan, Dianne Feinstein, and now Gavin Newsom, to be able to figure out how to solve this problem. There is a bed for everybody there. But to the point that was made earlier, to be able to take a bed that night, you leave your dog or your partner or your belongings. And so what we've seen in the last couple of years in San Francisco is the development of what's been called navigation centers, which you can bring your pets, you can bring your partner, you can bring your belongings in there. All of the reasons where people wouldn't go. It's safe. When you talk to homeless people in the Bay Area over the past few years, it's some of the most dangerous places to go. So the safety element of it is something now that they're completely and utterly focused on. And I think about some of the challenges that if we don't attack this right now, that this city will have. In his opening remarks, Michael said, what an unbelievable city this is. And I've been gone 50-odd years. And it's with great pride I come back as the chief executive of the #1 tourist attraction in this city, Liverpool Football Club. We generated £454 million for this city in GVA last year. And as we continue our success on the pitch, we bring more and more people to this city. But 10, 15 years from now, this city is going to be the absolute jewel economically, socially and economically, and it's going to have the possibility of doing what's happened in San Francisco, the gentrification of the cost of housing, the cost of living, will then start to disintermediate people at the bottom of the ladder. And then they will unfortunately be left without a home. San Francisco today, cost of a one-bedroom apartment is just about $4,000 a month. People are fleeing away to other areas, but people are being put out on the streets. So when I think about what we need to do as a city is get ahead of it. I think we've got a problem right now that, given the focus and all of the input that my fellow panel members and obviously Jon and the passionate plea that Karl made We've got a manageable problem if attacked right now. If left to fester, if left to go the way that San Francisco did, where money was applied in the wrong places, if it became politicized, which it certainly did in the San Francisco Bay Area, if it became what it is now, which is a class system war, where you've got so much wealth and people trying to push homeless people away out of sight to other cities, other areas of California, if we don't learn by these lessons, are going to face the same things. As I travel this city, Saturday night I was in the Baltic Market with my family, and the energy and the excitement and that area and the Knowledge Quarter, that was reminiscent to me of South of Market in San Francisco when I moved there in the 80s. Now one of the most wealthy digital media hubs in the world. And we need to identify what we need to do as a city right now. Otherwise, we're going to be in the same boat 10, 15 years from now as this city grows and develops. At Liverpool Football Club, what we try to do is look at the symptoms. What can we do using what we call the power of the badge to help people? We focus through our LFC Foundation and our Red Neighbours team in trying to provide quality of life for what we think are the most disadvantaged and most vulnerable. Food poverty. Most of you know that if you go to a football match here, Liverpool, Everton, Tranmere Rovers encourage you to bring food for the food banks. 7,000 families can't put food on the table. It is a slippery slope from not being able to feed your family to being on the street. We look at social isolation. We look at some of the challenges the elderly have. And this is not a young person's issue. This is all age brackets. And the elderly who have lost families, widows, widowers, who cannot then afford to pay the rent or default on their mortgage. We bring social groups together at Anfield, whether it's walking football on Friday mornings for men 70 plus who have nobody at home but need some social environment to come together to encourage each other. Whether it's chair yoga at Anfield throughout the week, which my wife volunteers for, and gives yoga lessons to elderly women. It's not about the yoga, it's about the cup of tea, it's about supporting each other, it's about empowerment, it's about helping each other with each other's problems. They're widows for the most part. They've got nobody, their families have moved on. Mental health issues. At Liverpool Football Club, right here in Chapel Street, where our headquarters are, we have 30 trained, what we call Red Minds. These are employees that have been through psychological training to help people who have mental problems. And it's as simple as having a cup of tea at work, talking through somebody to talk with. The issues of mental health have been discussed this morning, and certainly I saw that in the Bay Area. As you get to a situation where you cannot help yourself, you cannot feed yourself, your sense of pride, your sense of self-esteem, the madness that Karl talked about, the demons that you have. These are the issues that we are trying to, at Liverpool Football Club, with our own staff. And these are well-paid people. These have homes, but they have their issues as well. And simply by having people who are trained, who wear lanyards that says Red Minds, coming together, so just have a cup of tea, a natter, as we say here in Liverpool. That's our way of helping. We think through what Red Neighbours does in some of the most impoverished postcodes in this city, and in particular, trying to help people in and around our stadium. The irony is never far from me when I go up Walton Breck Road, up through Everton Valley, through Kirkdale on the way to the game, that I'm passing through where I was born and where I grew up on Scotland Road, but still some of the most impoverished postcodes. And yet we have this jewel of a stadium. We have hundreds of millions of pounds worth of talent running around. We have an obligation as a football club to give back. And yes, the visitor economy benefits enormously from having Liverpool Football Club, Everton Football Club, Tranmere Rovers over on the world here. And people around the world talk about football and Liverpool in one sentence here. How do we corral the power of that badge, the power of that linkage back? Denise talked about repeat offenders. We have twinned with Her Majesty Prison Old Course as part of the twinning project. And we use our LFC Foundation staff to go into the prison, and as people come out, they come to Anfield Sports and Community Centre and get training, life training, skills again, help them get jobs, bring them back. And again, the power of our badge, the power of Everton's badge, the power of Tranmere's badge does that. We have that benefit here. So I guess For me, both personally and professionally, I've seen a city in San Francisco that I loved living in really go through periods of difficulty. And if you read about it tonight, just go Google homelessness in San Francisco. The numbers are stunning. They will spend over $300 million in providing homes, temporary homes, for the people of that city. And again, not much bigger than this city. Because their structures, their policies, their ideas have failed. Now, I think the good news is we're at an inflection point of a city in which we're going to see unbelievable growth over the next 10 to 15 years. This city is going to be unrecognizable because of everything all of us are doing in the private sector and the public sector. But the one thing we need to do is make sure we don't leave people behind. We don't disintermediate them from what they deserve, which is a decent life, housing, food, social interaction. And we, as football clubs, will do our bit as best we can. We employ 2,500 people on game day. And more we're looking to all sectors impacted. How can we bring and train homeless people to work at the stadium? And our teams are looking at that. Our casual workforce is one of the biggest casual workforces in this region. But going forward, I think for me, as I say, both personally and professionally, I've seen when a city hasn't attacked the problem and what's happened. And it wasn't about money. This is one of the wealthiest parts of the world. It's Silicon Valley. It's all the companies that I mentioned. And let's hope we get to where San Francisco is 10, 15 years from now. But I also hope we don't leave people behind in that journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. That was absolutely brilliant. Raising, I think, even higher the level of this debate. Whose city, for whom, is the key issue, really, Peter's raising, both now and in the future, and the risk of success. Our new book is coming out. The risk of success is almost as great as the risk of failure, not leaving people behind. So raising that issue and ask to focus upon what kind of place we want to create. Secondly, specific actions, what the club is doing and what it's trying to help. So it's A, a big question, and B, a set of things which they are doing. I think we've had a terrific collection of presentations from everyone this morning, from Jon and Karl and Frank and Joe and our 5 panelists. There'll be a couple more interventions, provocations to come. But you've heard a huge amount of big picture and small picture stuff, some challenges, a lot of optimism, what we're going to do. The chance now for colleagues in the room to ask a question, make a contribution. We do have a number of microphones roving. And so comments, please, I'd ask you to keep them fairly short and sharp. Comments to what the panelists have said, but also Jon and Karl and Frank and Joe remain here, so it's open house essentially. So if you just put your hand up, say who you are, make your comment, your question. We'll take a few of them, and I'll get colleagues on that row or this row to respond. So thanks. I've got Chris Graham first, please. Microphone's coming.
I'm Christopher Graham. I'm chair of the board of Capacity, the Public Services Lab. Fascinating contributions this morning, but the question arises, how are we going to join this all up? So my question is, how can public authorities make better use of the voluntary, charitable and social enterprise, VCSE sector, to respond in a joined-up way to the challenges of homelessness and rough sleeping?
Okay, thank you. Big question. Take 1 or 2 more, please. There's a hand right there. There's a hand below a hat.
Hi, I'm Pete Cunningham. Just to let you know, I'm a director of Green Pastures. We house 3,500 of the most marginalised people in the UK, which is about 17% of those that Jon were talking about, or 2% of the national average. So I'm not speaking from inexperience, but my question is quite similar to the one we've just had. And we heard we need to take action. And so my question is, a need of an action plan for all that we can actually observe is happening. We are all here wanting to do something, every one of us. What is it that you are going to suggest to us that we can do as a corporate body to change things? Now, we have a plan, and that is to end homelessness in the next 10 years. So Green Pastures will do that and accomplish it. If any of you would like to join us, that would be great. But what is your plan for us to change the actions of Liverpool?
Thank you very much. A very direct challenge indeed. Thank you. There are 2 or 3 hands right at the back there. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. And over here, apologies, yes, over here next.
My name's Bronwen Brooks from Bloodstone Housing. First of all, just in terms of the hope message that's been given, last year we were given the chance to do a panel debate much like this one, our staff away day, in front of about 500 people engaging on homelessness. And in terms of hope, you kind of the seeds that are being sown in this room are being sowed on fertile ground. There's a lot of desire for people out there to help on this issue. So a massive source of hope for everyone. And secondly, with a different hat on, as Secretary of the Spirit of Shankly Liverpool Supporters Union, with the national work that we do with Crystal Palace, for example, who are a football club really kind of far thinking in this. They open up their club facilities for the homeless, especially through the winter. There's a question more for Peter, is whether Liverpool would look to do that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's 2 hands there. I know there's some hands around there and a hand here. And I'll take 3 or 4 more comments and let our panelists in front row react. Thank you.
Hello. I'm Rita Waters. I'm Chief Executive of the National Youth Advocacy Service.
I've been told, yes, thank you for the microphone. I was told off earlier. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm Rita Waters, Chief Executive of the National Youth Advocacy Service. We've been going for 35 years, representing the rights of children, predominantly who are in care or care leavers. And I just wanted to share a few stats with you that 1 in 4 homeless people have been in care. 33% of a third of care leavers will become homeless within the first 2 years of leaving care. And children are leaving care between 16 and 18, when non-care leavers are leaving home between 22 and 25 years old. So when you asked before about what can we do, we talked about support in charities. I would like to ask everybody in the room who is private sector, have you got a charity of the year? I'd like to ask everybody in the room that supports grant funding, can you smarten up and improve the process of charities applying for your grants? We have grants that sometimes take 18 months to come through. The crisis is growing. So please, if you want a charity of the year, we've been working for 35 years to look after the rights of children in care. I would be delighted to be your charity of the year. I'd be delighted if you have community funds to apply. We are working with a number of organisations right across the country. We are a national charity, and we support 25,000 children a year who are in care. Right now, as we sit here today and you sit up there on the stage, there are 90,000 children in care today. That's 90,000 futures that we can affect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That colleague, yes, please.
Hello, my name's Sarah Lawton and I'm from the Construction Impact Framework. I'd like to share with you how we are, as a private company, supporting the homeless agenda. So we are a private company, but we are a pro-social business. 50% of our profits we reinvest into the voluntary, social and charitable sectors. What we are doing at the moment, we are working with anchor institutions in Salford, and each time they procure construction works and services through our business, we are building pots of money. We have now brought those anchor institutions round the table, and together we will be identifying which services in terms of mental health, in terms of debt management, in terms of abuse, that we can invest in collectively to address the issues around homelessness. So I think what I have learned in terms of being a private company that is pro-social, if the commissioning is right, the commission of work and services, if you understand social value, if you understand that you can really make social impact, then actually some of those public sector, private sector partnerships can really, really make a difference.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm sure there are more hands up, I know, but this colleague has the microphone, so this will be the last comment for this round. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so my name's Roger Jonas. I'm from Signature Living. We've heard a lot of pitches. We've heard a lot of anecdotes. For me, I have to say that Andy Cooke is the only person who has given us 6 really great points and action points. He did say the solution is in this room. I don't know if the majority of people here know that Signature Living, as a private sector organisation, have invested massively in a project called the Cotton Street Project. And the Cotton Street Project has already started, in just 5 months, started to see some remarkable outcomes. I'm a little bit devastated that Lawrence Kenwright, who is our chairman, is not sitting on the panel, because he has demonstrated a solution that is working. And it is a solution that's working. And I would invite people to come and talk to us. I don't mean come to Cotton Street, because it's not a zoo. It's a place which is the residence for people who are homeless and have everything that you've talked about today: mental health issues, dependencies on Class A, alcohol dependencies, physical health. And we have created something that has now been tested. It's a tried and tested model. And if we had 10 Cotton Streets, with the intervention of a forward-thinking business leader like Lawrence Kenwright, who I can't stress enough, he should be on that panel. He has the solution. We need to be talking more to people like him. That's all I need to say. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and next time. Okay, lots and lots of comments and questions there. Some about getting our act together, some about collaborating, some having a plan, some about speeding up applications, a particular comment about LFC and WINT stuff, social value, and thing about Andy Cooke's powerful points. I'm going to ask the front row here if they want to quickly respond to any. Then I'm going to ask our panelists if they wish to respond. We can't all respond to all of them, so I'd just like to take a handful of comments here. Jon Sparkes from Crisis. Here's a microphone. We'll all have to be fairly quick now. We've got a couple more speakers to come. So, Jon, please, thanks.
Thank you. And it is quick. And firstly, the question of, can we join up? I'm absolutely inspired by everything I've heard everybody on this panel say, even things where we might disagree. But I'm absolutely inspired by everything that this panel has said. So whoever it was that said the answer should be in this room, I think is absolutely right. There's definitely the leadership in this room, if only they spend the time together and be that leadership. On the question of whether it's possible to come up with a plan, we set ourselves this task to come up with a national plan, so a plan that said, if tomorrow morning our political leadership got out of bed and said, ending homelessness is the most important thing to us, we spent 2 years writing this thing, Everybody in How to End Homelessness in Great Britain. It's not necessarily the particular answer, particularly for Liverpool. It would need adapting, but it's a good starting point, I'd suggest. And on that, the point about people who've been in care, I think really, really important. So much of what we're talking about today is predictable, and therefore, if it's predictable, it's preventable. And I think it's not just people who've been in care, that's a very, very big group. People who've been brought up in poverty, people who've experienced adverse and traumatic experiences as a child, people who've been in our state institutions, whether it's the army, whether it's the prison, whether it's the hospital system, whether it's people who've been victim of domestic violence. We know them. Our public bodies, our charities and our companies meet these people every day. And if it's predictable, it's preventable.
Thank you for that. Can I ask Mayor Joe to quickly respond to some of the key messages, and I'll come to our panel. Thank you.
Yeah, just a few things from me. Joined up was a question that was asked. Let's not be too critical, because we are joined up. We work with the Whitechapel Centre, the YMCA, Salvation Army, a whole plethora of different organisations. So there is joined up thinking going on. There is joined up work going on, and that will continue. Yes, we can improve. Yes, we can be better, but that's what we're aiming to do. So let's be positive about the fact that we do have. And as the Chief Constable rightly said, there are enough beds in this city to accommodate everybody every night. So there is no need for rough sleeping. There's always room inside. That's the first point. In terms of actions and what we do, then, you know, it is about making things work and the successful things that we know work. One of my favourite charities is Transforming Choices. Transforming Choices work with people who want to help themselves. They have to be willing to transform their lives, and then they're there for a 12, 13-week cycle, and during that time they're given accommodation and they're given work and they're given hope. That's what we need to do and build on that. My call for the private sector is what you can do is help sponsor. It costs thousands of pounds. We support Transforming Choices. All of the agencies, YMCA, Salvation Army, Whitechapel, we spend as a city millions and millions of pounds. By the way, I'm not demanding a place on the panel. But the reality is that we need to actually make sure that we continue to do more. Sponsor Transforming Choices. Sponsor somebody if they go in there, that when they come out, you'll be there for them. You'll support them into accommodation. You'll support them into a job. That's what the private sector need to do. The Youth Advocacy Service, yes, it's part of our inclusive growth programme. It comes very much back to what Peter talked about with San Francisco. I made a pledge when I became leader of this council that we would destroy the divide between the poor and the rich. We've got a long way to go. That's an ambition. We're getting there. Transforming lives is part of that pledge. That's why we do inclusive growth. Social value, we make sure it's at the heart of everything that we do. So when we build new buildings, we make sure that we employ local companies, we make sure that we pay the living wage, and we make sure that companies we engage with pay the living wage. In terms of that accommodation that we're providing, 10,000 homes we're going to be building. Those homes that we're going to be building are going to be secure tenancies for people to live in and make sure that they're able to afford them by the support that we give them. So, you know, I want to say to you, and it's absolutely important that we build on the successes that we've done here in the city. We are successful. But I'm not complacent, and I know that we've got to do so much more. But I think all of the points that have been made, my plea, and I'll end just on my response to it, is that if you want to help, then get engaged with the Whitechapel Centre, get engaged with Transforming Choices, sponsor these organisations, sponsor people, give them hope. That's what's going to solve some of the problems that people face. And then we can inspire others to actually do the same thing. But I think let's be also grateful to what the voluntary sector do for us. The Paper Cup, for instance, Whitechapel, all of the organisations that help, but we've got to do more.
Thank you. Frank, do you want to respond to anything?
Thanks, Joe. I'll repeat one of the points that Steve made on the video. I think it is recognised, it's clearly understood. There's some fantastic efforts being done across all of the local authority areas in the city region. I think one of the opportunities that the CA presents is the ability to coordinate that strategically on a wider geographical footprint, because I think one of the key things that we've got to do is come up with the solutions that aren't just quick fix, they are sustainable and they are long term. And I think we need to go back to a point that was referenced earlier on. What do we need to do to turn the tap off? Because the tap's got a number of different components in it as well. It starts from very early on in someone's life. It's their education opportunity. It's the aspirations that they're able to deliver it to. It's giving them employment and employment opportunities. So we need to make sure that what we're doing is part of a whole system approach that enables us to not just have to deal with a problem, but we actually tackle the symptoms of the problem and then work forward from there.
Thank you for that. Prevention, Rob, before...
Michael, can I just make
one quick one?
One quick point, because I forgot to mention this, because it was mentioned about Signature Living. Signature Living are doing a great job in supporting people and engaging them in dealing with their issues and getting them into employment. I'm not saying everybody can be a Signature Living, but if we all do that small part to help the city, then it can make that big difference, because that's happening, and that's a good example of how we're getting people from off addiction and into work, and that's exactly what we need to do.
Brilliant. Thank you, Joe. Panellists, we're going to have a couple more interventions from Liam Thorp and Bill Addy, and Rae Brooke will finish off. and the panelists will stay with me. But Andy's already said he'd like to respond quickly to some of the points. So anyone wants to pick up any of those points that haven't been addressed? Andy, and the microphone, please.
Just very briefly, and I will be brief, the great thing about being Chief Constable is you don't really care who you're upset. So, here goes. We get great support from third sector, from voluntary organisations, but there's only so much money that goes round, and every individual organisation wants to do things their own way. I don't think there's ever been a better time or a more necessary time for a joint commissioning to identify exactly what the problem is and then to identify the people who can help, rather than the cycle of £20,000 going here, £20,000 going here, and at the end of the day, we're not necessarily getting £40,000 worth of worth. That's not a criticism of an individual organisation. We have got to be smarter about how we approach the problem, and it's got to be far more joined up.
Thank you for that. Peter.
Thank you. There was a question about would the football club open its premises, Anfield, wherever, to support homelessness? No. And why no? Because, well, because that sounds harsh. Joe will tell me every single day if I ask him there are enough beds here. What we saw at Crystal Palace was a PR play. No disrespect to Steve Parish, no disrespect to Selhurst Park. Taking a photograph of 12 barracks beds in a warmed-up concourse is not the solution to the problem. The Crystal Palace Foundation needs to do what we do every day. Anfield's open right now for the community. We've got chair yoga going on right now. We're feeding kids because it's half-term in a lot of places, so the kitchens are open. That's the real solution. And again, I don't want to disrespect another Premier League club, one I respect, and in a tough area of East London. But it was a soundbite of a photo opportunity that they got 24 hours of play. And then I talked to Steve Parish later. He said, I'm not sure anybody showed up to take advantage of it. So it was something you can't, I'll use an American expression, put a Band-Aid on the problem. It's something you've got to have sustainable, daily, consistent support of the problems. Not just something, let's take a picture, let's tweet it out, let's make people think that we're a great football club, which they are. You got to do it day in, day out. And if I thought that by opening up all of the lounges that we had tens of thousands of people here that needed somewhere warm to sleep, you bet we'd find a way. But that's not the problem. There's a bed for everybody here right now. Getting them to those beds is an issue. But making sure they don't need those beds and really investing in that element of it is what the real solution is.
Peter, thank you. I think that's absolutely the right response, not on behalf of the football club, but on behalf of the whole city. Some panelists haven't had a chance to comment. There are other questions. However, we've got two more speakers who will make a provocation. Can I invite Liam Thorp from Liverpool Echo? And we're trying to move it around, so Liam will come up there.
Man, I feel very sort of holy up here, to be honest. You don't normally get journalists up this high. We're normally down in the gutter somewhere. So anyway, I feel completely unqualified to talk about homelessness compared to the people in this room. But one thing I can do is talk about the stories that we cover. And unfortunately, we've covered quite a few, including this week when Crispin asked me to say a few words today. I'd started to jot a few things down, and then that all changed when we were made aware of the death of Richard Keogh. I took a call from Richard's brother-in-law and his sister to speak a bit about it. They just really wanted people to know what had happened. They wanted people to know that he died, that he was a person, that he had friends and family, and that he wasn't just another statistic in a worrying increase in this country. He was a nice lad. I think his brother-in-law said he'd let life get the better of him. That's so often the case with so many people. But he was a nice lad, and he was a human being. I was going through Twitter, as I spend a large part of my life doing, responding to criticism, usually about why we do so many stories about Love Island. But this was, I can't really defend that, to be honest. And then loads of people were saying, the outpouring of love, the outpouring of anger at what had happened, that another person had been lost, had died in a tent on the streets of our city. is completely unacceptable. But there is still an issue with public perception, because one of the tweets that really got me angry, and being on Twitter these days, I can't really allow myself to get angry that much because I get called all sorts, mainly when people find out I'm from Manchester. That's the problem. I know, if anyone wants to leave now, then please feel free. Wait till they find out I'm a United fan. Anyway, sorry, Peter. A GP, well, a guy who claimed to be a GP. This was on the day that Richard had died, and we tried to report it as sensitively as possible. He just said, probably an overdose on Class A drugs as part of the addiction that led to him being homeless, and therefore unwilling to accept any type of support except money to feed his disastrous habit. Just like that, just summed up, dismissed a man's life. Because I don't know why, but maybe it makes him feel better. Maybe it makes him feel better that the people he walks past on the street, oh, they're just druggies, they're just smackheads, so therefore I don't have to worry about them, and I don't have to worry about the guilt that I might feel. I challenged him on it, and he accused me of politicising the subject. And I said, I absolutely am politicising the subject because, I'm the political editor, and I think it's a deeply political issue. People often say that I shouldn't be sort of taking a stance on particular politics, but as Joe will tell you, when your local council of the second most destitute city in the country has lost 64% of its funding since 2010, this is a city council that does a heck of a lot under very trying circumstances. It's running out of options. It's running out of those support networks that it can offer. Labrae House is amongst the best facilities I've ever seen. I've been there, I've met the guys loads of times. As I say, I come from Manchester, I go back there and there isn't anything like it, but there needs to be more, and I think a lot of what the guys are talking about today in terms of Labrae House should be a first option to make sure that no one's on the streets for two nights, but then to move them on to these more secure wraparound services, and I think the Housing First pilot is going to be a big one of that. But just getting back to Richard, I get quite angry when I see people dismiss people, and Amy Teese was another story that I covered earlier this year. We spoke to family members. I went up to the Eldon Grove area where Amy was living, and nobody should be living like that. And it shouldn't matter what decisions they've taken. It shouldn't matter what journey they've gone down. Nobody would choose to die in a tent on a cold street. And therefore, if you can bring it in yourself to sum them up and dismiss them because they've made some bad decisions, then that's a complete lack of humanity for me. So the last person I wanted to mention name-wise was a guy called Gratis Gratmanis. A couple of years ago, he also died on the streets of Liverpool. He's from the Czech Republic, and he came to Liverpool and he was working, sending money back to his family in Czech Republic. And at that stage, there wasn't anywhere for him to go, and because he didn't have a right to remain, he didn't have the necessary right to be here to have access to public funds under what I believe is a pretty cruel government policy. But all credit to Joe and to the council and to the others. They've now said, sod that, it doesn't matter. If you turn up to Labrae House, it doesn't matter what your circumstances are, you're allowed in, because what's the alternative? You turn someone away and they die on a cold street. That doesn't bear thinking about. I noticed Joe's left while I've started this speech. He normally does that actually when I start speaking. But we disagree on a lot, and part of being a political editor at the Echo is making an hour a day for Joe to just sort of complain about everything you've done. But the one thing I think we do agree on is homelessness and this approach that the City Council have taken. They do more than most of the cities, and it's really impressive. But when you look last year that 600 homeless people died on the streets, a 25% rise in the past 5 years, this is a political problem. And therefore it's great to see political leaders and community leaders and business leaders coming together. That's pretty much it. The one last thing I wanted to say is a lot of people have talked about what happens before people become homeless. And another topic that I'm seen to be writing a story on every week is universal credit and the benefits system. I think a lot of you will probably have seen a story that I did that sort of went everywhere because of the shocking nature of the images of a guy called Stephen Smith, who literally looked like he had been starved to death. And it was even not much shocks me, to be honest, in the job that I'd been doing for a long time, but those pictures and then going to meet Stephen was unbelievable to see. And to think that guy had actually passed a work capability assessment, been told that he was fit for work, is scandalous and unbelievable. And, you know, Amber Rudd can turn around and say she's going to look at it, but this thing needs to have been looked at a long time ago. There are people every day in this city being told that they can't have benefits, that they have to wait for benefits, sanctioned because they haven't got a mobile phone, which Esther McVeigh obviously thinks that they should all have. And therefore are ending up on the streets. And if it wasn't for some of the amazing groups here, some of the people who work at food banks, they shouldn't have to be providing that lifeline. So it's great to see everyone here and what they're bringing to the table today. But for me personally, I think a major shift in political will has to happen as well. And therefore, I think it's important for everyone to get behind a particular brand of thinking that will basically treat people as human beings once again. Karl, I thought your words were absolutely amazing, and of everyone, we're always told in journalism to speak to the human beings, and no offence to the very distinguished panellists, but it'll be you that I'm going to try and have a chat with after, if that's all right, mate, because that's the human face of it, that, you know, he knows more than anyone. He knows about Richard, he knows about what happened with Amy, and I think it's, of all the people, if I could urge you to listen to anyone, then it would be Karl today, and not me. But anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Liam. And can I invite Bill Addy, who's Chief Executive of the Business Improvement District, to give his reflections and thoughts, please, before Rae Brooke finishes off. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael, and good afternoon, everybody. For me, this is probably my home, standing in this pulpit, because I do that on a regular basis on a Sunday morning, because as well as Chief Executive of the Business Improvement District, I'm also a priest here at Liverpool Parish Church. So it's tremendous to see so many of you here today, particularly as Karl has said, this are the business leaders of this city, these are the third sector leaders, these are the people of the establishment of our city and of our city region. And it's these people and the people in this room that we need to work together to enable Karl and to enable all the other Karls in this city region, to actually have a hope. As a priest, I would believe in the faith of a man who came to this earth for each one of us, because he believed in the worth of each human being. And that's the most important thing that we should have. At the centre of all that we do is the worth of each human. And for us to be able to walk past people in the street should break our hearts every day. And in many cases it does. But we have to do that, in a collaborative way, in a concerted way, that we bring everything together, where we put egos aside, where we forget about which organisation is the best organisation, and we start to deliver it in a way that makes a real difference. I was just going to do one thing this morning. One thing was a pledge, and I'll pledge to Rae that I'll work very hard. She's going to talk about a business charter very shortly. The Business Improvement District is a collaboration. It's an organisation that brings businesses together, not just in this city, but across the UK. I'm privileged to chair the national organisation of the BID Foundation, and I know working nationally we can start to shift this on a national basis, because we have a national voice, and that voice needs to go into central government, and it needs to say to government that enough is enough. We are the 6th richest nation in the world, and enough is enough, and we need to keep that message going out. So for the work that Liam does, I say thank you for that. But in terms of collaboration here in the city and the city region, the most important things, because London's great, but this is the place that we call home, and this is where we need to make a difference. So one of the things I will pledge is that the businesses within the Business Improvement District, we will work as that Business Improvement District to bring those organisations together, to deliver a charter which will enable what the needs are to be spoken about and to be delivered against. I know Stephen will work in collaboration with me. I'm volunteering you to do that now, so we will do that. The other thing I would like to point out to you, that we already have a platform that we can all use. How many people have got smartphones with them today? Get your smartphone out. Go into the App Store and type in street support. Just do it now. I don't normally do this on a Sunday, but perhaps, Rector, I might do this next week. So if you go into your App Store, type street support. Street support is a platform that was created by 2 young people in Manchester, because they are technical capabilities. So they thought, well, how can we use our technical skills to solve a problem that happens in the streets of Manchester? So they created street support. At the moment, it operates across 17 cities in the UK, including Liverpool. It's live in Liverpool, and it offers a facility for finding help and giving help. What we need to do actually is make people more aware of that, make all the agencies that are in place, and Andy, you talked about how do we do it centrally. It's already there, it's already live, but we need to get people engaged within that. We are working together with the City Council and the City Region to fund a post that will enable us to do that, so that we can use that as a platform. So when we need to find where are the agencies that are delivering help, then we can do that. Where are the people that need help, we can point them to it. It's one part of a solution that all of us need to engage in all the ways that we can, but we need to do it on a concerted basis. So that's all I was going to say today. I did have a few more things to say, but really that's it. It's about us working together, and the business community is at the heart of that as well, that we will be fully behind that. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. The moving spirit for this today was Rae Brooke, and she's going to finish. We're finishing at 12:30. She has 3 minutes. Absolutely no pressure there.
No pressure. This morning, many opinions and ideas have been shared, but what is important is what we do with those, and we have captured them, and we will make sure that we're in touch with each and every one of you who has attended here today in the next 48 hours, asking you, would you like to further engage? So be ready for that. I'd like to also say that, following on from what Bill was saying, we are keen to engage with the business community in a more meaningful way and to support and facilitate moving the agenda forward. So we are looking to establish a small group of business leaders who will work with us, to identify what they feel they can do and commit to helping the issue, but also working with frontline service deliverers to get them to have clarity around what would be helpful. I think Stephen mentioned about communications and how we can tap into communications in the business community. Let's get the clarity of message as to how we can mobilise the business community to support and make sure that we have an effective campaign and continuous communication around what helps. I think also we want to be sure that 20 years ago, the Community Foundation for Merseyside was set up and we've achieved a lot, but what's more important is what we achieve in the next 20 years. I want to thank each and every one of you again. I want to thank all of you for taking the time out this morning. I really hope that you feel it's been beneficial. If you feel more engaged and you feel more informed, then we've achieved our objective today. Thank you.
And the Rector.
I can't believe that actually it's past and we're wrapping up almost on time. It's been a tremendous conference, and most importantly, from what Rae has just said, that this is not the sort of conference where you're going to walk out and say, that was a nice morning, wasn't it? This is a conference where you're going to walk out thinking about the issues, and then if you forget about them over your gin this evening, you're going to get an email in your inbox if you've attended to say, right, let's take this on a bit further. All we've heard today, again and again, has been about collaboration and action. In just a moment, I'm going to invite you all to come outside. There are 2 doors that will be thrown open. Those doors and the way you came in this morning, we're going to go out into the gardens where the rain has just stopped, and we're joined by the Lord Mayor of Liverpool out there. We're also joined by service users and residents of YMCA Liverpool. We're going to hear from them very briefly before we pull off the covers of the sculpture, and the Bishop of Liverpool, who has joined us here on the front row, will bless and dedicate it. Do come out, be part of that, and go away thinking about it, and think about it every time you pass it. I'd like to thank all of our speakers this morning. I won't list them all because they've all been introduced. You've heard them all. They've been absolutely fantastic in giving their time and their commitment to this. But most of all, if I name anyone, I'd like to thank Professor Michael Parkinson, whom I knew would be the right person to chair this and to pull it together and turn ideas, enthusiasm and passion that we all hold in this room into something that's going to become action. So on behalf of Rae and myself, as we've sat and planned this over the months, thank you to Michael for all that you've done, and thank you all. As I said when we were inside, the unveiling is going to be done by resident service users of Liverpool YMCA, and we're very grateful for their participation and their support. Stephen, I'm going to want to introduce Stephen now. Stephen, come down here. Stephen is from Liverpool YMCA, and he's going to read to us first. Well, you tell us.
I'm going to read you a poem about homelessness and beating it. Shining Star, it's called. There was once a man who used to sit alone. People used to mock him and people used to gloat. You might find that funny, but I implore you, what if you were in the same boat? Someone once said, always treat others how you expect to be treated. So now I ask, is it okay to abuse that lonely man till his soul and personality are crushed and lay defeated? Then one day, simply because he had enough, a thought suddenly occurred to him why life was so tough. Out of the abyss of sadness and loneliness you grew, no matter what curveball life threw at you. Out of the ashes, like a phoenix you rose, full of resentment and hate for the life you chose. Look out over the horizon and you will surely see that the future is bright for you and me. Just remember, no matter what people say you are, each and every one of us are a shining star.
Thank you. I'm going to invite Stephen now with Joe and Michaela to unveil the sculpture, and straight after, as the cover comes off, the Right Reverend Paul Bayes, Bishop of Liverpool, will say a prayer of blessing and dedication over it. So Stephen, Joe, Michaela.
Are you ready, friends? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Friends, whenever you walk down here, whenever you see this statue, I want you to think about love and anger. We love people, all people. And you've heard in the church today the anger about homelessness and rough sleeping. Whenever you walk past here, please look at the words on the flagstone here. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. And as I bless this now, I pray that all of you who committed yourselves today to work together will continue to join up thinking so that your anger and your love will make a difference to all the folks who need you. Let's pray together. Loving God, you tell us that in your house there's room for everyone. Help us as we strive for a world where everyone has a home that truly meets their need. Give us the grace to welcome strangers and refugees. Give us the insight to see where inequality hurts. Fill us with courage to do our part. Lord God, bless this sculpture, that it may provoke and encourage, challenge and inspire. And may we see in the faces of those we encounter the face of your Son, Jesus Christ, who lives with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen.
Thank you. Please do feel free to stay and enjoy the sculpture as long as you wish, or go into the dry inside. I think Bean might still be there if you want to grab a cup of tea or coffee. But thank you all for coming. Thank you for your participation this morning. And please keep thinking about this issue because it's not going anywhere immediately. Thank you.